Welcome back to Rise to Liberty podcast. Today I am joined by, I would say, the infamous Pete Quinones. How you doing today, Pete?
Good. Thank you for inviting me, Jacob. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. It's been a long time coming. So, kind of just want to just jump straight in with both feet.
Mhm.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the story with you now is you were libertarian, and I'm not sure if you call yourself post-libertarian or if that's kind of the label that people have branded you.
It's like a word I came up with for the title of the podcast, and it stuck. And then, of course, my friend Stefan Kinsella had to go and find an article from like 1993 or 1994 where someone had used the term post-libertarian just to prove to me that I didn't invent it. So that's okay. I'll take credit in making it popular, especially since Paul Gottfried's new book, A Paleoconservative Anthology. There's an article in there by C.J. Engel where in the title, the term post-libertarian is in there. And I know where he got that from.
All right. So do you kind of want to explain like what got you into libertarianism and then what led you, I guess, away from it?
Well, I mean, it's what I still am, is anti-war. Ron Paul talking about why the wars in the Middle East were happening, what caused them. And I didn't have that information. I started looking deeper into Ron Paul, and he started talking about libertarian. Yeah, he mentioned libertarianism. So I started reading some books. I read Ron Paul's book on foreign policy, which I believe is just a bunch of speeches from the House floor. And that helped me to understand more. But then I started going down the road of Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises. And I liked the ideas. They made a lot of sense to me. I think I was naive in thinking that a society like that could actually, happen in my lifetime or the lifetime of anyone's grandkids. But it sounds good. There are still, then I came up to 2017. I started a podcast. I just wanted to put my voice out there and talk about liberty, what I saw liberty as. And as things started progressing, I started noticing the culture more. I started noticing that there was a lot of violence in the streets. In 2017, I wrote an article on how I believe that all these women getting gender studies degrees were going to end up in HR departments. And that came true. But I don't think I'm not a genius for being able to look at that and figure that out. Around 2019, I really started looking at the way politics was being played, especially with the whole Russia and Ukraine gate. I realized that getting somebody elected was not going to help to increase liberty. Started talking to people like Paul Gottfried, the aforementioned Paul Gottfried. COVID comes along and I'm like, well, no one's running to the libertarians to ask for answers on how to solve this. As a matter of fact, they're openly mocking them. Like I remember posts on social media, they were just openly mocking libertarianism, some calling them the death of libertarianism. Now, you may not agree with that, and they may be wrong, but that's what people were saying. And no one wanted the answers that we had. And people generally bowed to the regime, to what the regime had to say. And I immediately was just like, okay, well, I can sit here and I can still talk about an ideology that is ideal. It's an ideal. It's an ought. Or I can figure out ways to get through this now. And COVID, people will say, oh, well, COVID's over. Well, it's not. We still have it's in people's minds. People changed their minds about what they were willing to tolerate. And I'm looking for a way to at least, I was talking to Tom Woods, and we were just talking about kicking the can far down the road, just surviving, but thriving while we survive. Um, until one day, maybe we can get secession going, and then you can start breaking it up into smaller polities. And I think even today you can try to do like a Hans Hermann Hoppe, what must be done, localism, on a small scale level. I don't think it's going to work out as perfectly as Hans lays out there, but we have to figure out what to do now. And just continuing to talk about, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin in Ancapistan just didn't seem like it was a good use of my time. If people want to keep talking about that, that's fine, but just stop coming after me for trying to find practical solutions. Just because I used to be a part of your religion and now I'm an apostate, doesn't mean you don't have to attack me. I still believe in certain things that libertarians talk about, decentralization, private property, but those are not exclusive to libertarianism. So calling my libertarian is, I don't believe in this overarching voluntary society. I mean, it's not going to happen. And if we were in a situation, say it was the 1910s, the 1920s, and we had this kind of idea and we could work towards it, there's less of a barrier in front of us to do it. The barrier that's in front of us right now, like literally wants to mutilate your children, not only their bodies, but their minds as well. So how do we, in order for anyone to start talking about an ideal, that barrier needs to be pushed through. And I put out a tweet today saying, the fight is going to be to fight through this. And you'll know you've won when you're out on the other side and you have your own institutions, when you're running your own institutions and you're running your own polities.
Interesting. So it was really just wanting more solutions, more practical means instead of just arguing politics or arguing theory.
Right. I mean, I got my my Twitter account back. That I had an older Twitter account, but I really wasn't like tied to that one. The one that I lost in, I think it was October of 2021. I really liked that Twitter account a lot, and it had over 20,000 followers. And I got it back. And Saturday, I just started posting, and on the accounts that I had been using in the meantime, there weren't a lot of libertarians following me. Well, there's still a lot of libertarians following me, and they would seem, even Saturday, it was just I allowed myself to be dragged into this debate about, I said, your rights are worth nothing unless you can invoke them and unless you can protect them. And otherwise, you're just talking theory. It's just a theory of rights. And somebody got really upset with that, and I said, well, an army, if an army's sticking guns in your face, and then people start talking about Max Stirner and egoism and everything, it's not egoism. It's just reality. It's the reality that we live in. If the only thing that you can do is talk about the way things ought to be, well, I mean, I don't know. Sure, I was a part of that, that inner circle, that echo chamber for a long time. And it's once you break out of it and once you start, I have just look at my books. Come to my house and look at my books. Every libertarian book that you can think of, I've read, and I probably have a first edition of. I've read them all. I know exactly what it is. I have a documentary on Amazon Prime about anarcho-capitalism, about the history of anarchy. I know what this all is. I know what it is. When I start to criticize any of it, just yelling straw man I don't care. I understand I understand what this is. I'm not arguing arguments. I'm arguing using arguments from real life. And just because you haven't considered those arguments before doesn't make it a straw man. And now I have books that I read books outside of libertarianism about, I mean, political theory of every imaginable sort going back centuries. And once you realize once you bring it up to the 20th century and then into the 21st century, and you realize the progression and where we're at, you realize that whatever comes next, whatever defeats this maniacal, warmongering, anti-human state is going to have to be something brand new that people are going to be comfortable with. It may not be libertarian. It may, you want it to have shadows. You want it to have private property. You want it to, to have, hey, leave me the hell alone kind of thing. All these things. You want it to be decentralized. You want it to have power at the most local polity possible. But it's not going to be fully libertarian. And if it's not fully libertarian, telling me that it's just tyranny, that's just, I mean, I've been there. I've made those arguments, and they just don't, they fall on deaf ears.
That's a red herring, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, it's, well, and I remember I was arguing with somebody, because I have a friend now who, you've heard people talk about Liechtenstein, right?
Oh yeah,
Prince Hans Adams, and if you've read his book, The State in the Third Millennium, great book if you can find it. Short book too. I have a friend who actually lives there now, and he made it in, and he tells me exactly what it's like there, and I'm like, it's like paradise. I mean, it's like, it's a literal paradise. And I was mentioning on Twitter, and this was before, this was like probably January of 2020, before most people had even heard of COVID. And I mentioned, we need to decentralize, and make it to what Hoppe talks about, 10,000 Liechtensteins. And somebody just goes, Liechtenstein is tyranny because you can be arrested for having marijuana. Okay. You're not paying any taxes. You're in a homogenous society with no crime, with no violent crime, no property crime. You should be willing to give things up. I remember in my documentary, I was talking to Ryan McMaken, and Ryan McMaken said, talking specifically about, and Ryan McMaken is he's with the Mises Institute, basically, their most prolific writer at Mises.org. And in the documentary, he said, what a Hoppian covenant community, what that would be was, you would join a community and be willing to give up a few of your freedoms, a few of your things that you may hold dear, so that you can have safety and you can live more in a society like you would want to. And that made a lot of sense. That's jarring for anarchists to hear, for people who think they're radical individualists who, can't even change their own oil. But the, but the idea is that you're never going to get the perfect. The perfect never exists in reality. Ideology, like an ideology of libertarianism, like say you're a Rothbardian libertarian, that ideology was created outside of reality. It was and once it's applied to reality, holes start getting shot into it quick. And we have to understand that, sure, if you could start with something new, if you had a new place where everybody's like, we need a new form of government, what do you want? Sure, you can have libertarianism for a short time, because people are corruptible, people are going to be corrupted, and and libertarians, for the most part, especially very ideological libertarians, are not willing to do what it takes to keep order. the kind of order they want, which would be punishment, which would be what I consider to be far beyond what Hoppian physical removal is. It would be like a Singapore type of public, punishment, even corporal punishment. And I've talked to people who've been to Singapore and like dropped money on the ground, and like somebody picked it up and ran like a block to give it back to them. Well, that is a culture first of all, that's a culture, which is something else that needs to be talked about. Culture is something where laws don't even have to be written on paper. They're just understood. Decency is understood. Order is understood. So yeah, when you're looking for what you want in the world, I've come to say, get involved in local politics, move to a small town. I'm telling you, if the small town is Democrat or liberal, progressive, you're not going to be able to get any kind of liberty kind of stuff done. You need to look for a smaller town and start with one or two things that you want either abolished or you want codified in law, and work from there. And I think Hoppe would. If Hoppe disagrees with that, I would definitely listen to him, because much of the local strategy that I talk about is inspired by his "What Must Be Done" speech.
So, I was really inspired to take local action when, well, first of all, I came into this movement, the liberty movement, the libertarian movement. I came into it with the idea that federal politics was screwed and there was no chance of changing anything at that level. So to me, it just kind of it seems ridiculous to even run federal candidates. I get the purpose of it in some aspects. Like, I don't even agree with, a national libertarian party that kind of goes against the belief in the first place. We're decentralized, so that's a centralization. And so it kind of seems ridiculous to me that we would focus on a Leviathan that, if you take 5 seconds to look at it, there's no change in that. Even if we got in as a president or anything else in the perfect world, we won't get anything done. So
yeah,
it doesn't seem like focusing federally is even any sort of sane person should do.
Well, Tho Bishop at the Mises Institute, he and I have talked about this, and he talks about it whenever he gets a chance, is you cannot think about concentrating on Washington, D.C. until you have an overwhelming majority of the state houses, because making a move on Washington, D.C. is going to require having control of the states. And, that's why it's, to me, I'm one of those people who start with sheriffs. You want to get the most liberty-minded sheriffs, the sheriffs that are the most anti-egalitarian, anti-left. Then you look at mayors. 20,000 mayors in the United States. If 10,000 of them were anti-regime right-wingers, they wouldn't even they don't even have to call themselves right-wingers. They can just be anti-regime and know this. And then you look at governors, and if we had 25 people, and I hate that I have to qualify this, because this is the thing that I get strawmanned on the most, is DeSantis. I was happy with the way DeSantis handled COVID. Now, when he shut down Florida, I don't forget that he shut down Florida, because I was living in Atlanta at the time, and Tom Woods left Florida and came up to Georgia, because we had already opened up, and he was like hanging around Atlanta. We had dinner the first week in May. We had lunch in a restaurant the first week in May in 2020. When most restaurants were still closed, in most states. I know there were some who pop up and say, "Oh, there's this." Okay, most places. And I was critical of DeSantis at that time. But when I saw the way he was seeking to handle mandates, that was when I was like, okay, this is what you got to do. And then watching him basically do what the left did, and the way he refigured all of the voting districts in Florida so that he would make sure that he won this time. I'm like, oh, somebody who actually looks at their enemy, figures out how their enemy wins, and says, we're going to turn this state bright red. I mean, a state that I lived in Florida for a lot of years. I mean, I lived in Broward County, which is basically the sixth borough of New York. I mean, it was it's the bluest county in the state, I think. But the job that he did there doing that. I mean, I've been no one has been as critical of his Israel policy, his neoconism, his just a bunch of other stuff that he, the fact that he won't let certain. I mean, he's just hardcore on certain things and very lax on others. But as far as I'm concerned, if you had 25 governors like DeSantis in the United States, I mean, there's a reason why Washington, D.C. and all the talking heads and the elite hate him. Because if you get a multiplier and you start seeing more governors like DeSantis popping up, they're going to have a problem, because DeSantis doesn't care what DC says. And as far as, the mandates went and other things, I mean, he's good on other things, and he went to war against corporatocracy, Disney. And I mean, Disney is the largest lobbyist in that state for decades. And he basically cut their balls off. So, I mean, I think that's, the problem, bring this back to libertarianism. The problem I have with that is that people will only look at his libertarians will only look at his war policy and ignore everything else, and realize there's a lot you can be learning by looking at what he's doing. Why would you not want to learn by someone who's winning? It tells me that some people just really maybe people are addicted to losing at this point, and it's some kind of moral sense of morality or something, a way to preen morality. We always lose because we're always right, and no one wants to be right. We're the only ones that are right. That's not a straw man. That's something that I see. And when I look back on the way I used to talk and argue things, and the way I've seen people talk and argue things, I don't think that's a straw man. I think that's I see what I see in libertarianism is a lot of activity disguising itself as accomplishment. And that's a problem, because I don't know what, accomplishment you could hold up. I don't have any problems with libertarians running for seats that are empty, and running unopposed. I think that's smart. That's intelligent. That's what the left would do. But unless you have the fortification of will, or even the will to power, to get in there and, fuck shit up, you're not going to move the needle at all. I mean, we see the needle being moved in a little bit here and a little bit there, but how do you guarantee that won't be overturned in 3 years? The way you do that is you do something like DeSantis did, where you basically go to war with your enemies and you defeat them, and you do it in ways that probably most people would consider to be unlibertarian.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I've reached, is the conclusion that it seems as though to reach the idealistic society, we would need unlibertarian means to reach the libertarian means, because we live in an unlibertarian society.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're going to have those people willing to cross that line. And then it's kind of, a fallacy at that point. It could end up repeating itself depending on the person, if they don't have strong enough will to relinquish whatever power they have procured during that time. And it seems as though this is the one thing that I can't stand about libertarians, which there's a lot that I can't, is we are terrible on culture. And culture, it has such an influence on almost everything. It's something happens in the culture, and then politics follows not too far after. I think it was Andrew Breitbart that said, politics is downstream from culture. And
I don't agree.
you don't agree with that?
I think power creates culture, and then culture is used to control the people. I mean, the culture of transgenderism and all these libertarians screaming for transgender rights. I mean, which are positive rights, which are supposed to have nothing to do with libertarianism. This whole transgender agenda, even to the point now where you can call it an industrial complex, a transgender industrial complex, did not happen organically. It was pushed from on high. Scott Howard. Yeah, Scott Howard, not Scott Horton. Scott Howard has a book called The Transgender Industrial Complex. And he just goes through and shows like that Governor Pritzker in Illinois is the biggest pusher. He's a billionaire. He's the biggest pusher and promoter and financer of the transgender, this whole agenda that we're seeing. And apparently he has a brother who is calling himself a woman now. And that's one of the reasons. And yeah, this didn't happen from out of nowhere. The anti-Russia, pro-Ukraine kind of culture. I mean, and the social media is a culture now where you have all these flags, people. Those aren't happening organically. Those are being pushed from the top down. A good book to read. It's 1,000 pages. You can find an abridged version of it, or you could just find a PDF and Control F and just look through it. It's from 1950. It's called The Authoritarian Personality, and it's basically a bunch of the guys from the Frankfurt School who I won't do anything to get I won't say who did it so that you don't get your stream knocked off. Who commissioned it, but it basically shows, okay, look at all of these right-wing traits: going to church, having kids, being proud of accomplishment. One of them, which is really weird, is they said that somebody has fascist tendencies if they look at a pedophile and they want to punish that person beyond what the law allows. I thought that was really, really weird that they can, especially considering what we're, the zeitgeist today. This book basically shows that they were going to engineer the culture, and how were they going to do it?
Same with there's a book called Queer Theory of it's Queer Theory. I can't remember the subtitle, but it basically lays out exactly what's happening.
Yeah. So the elites are, whoever these elites are, I'm not going to say, I'll pretend like I know who they are. They're pushing this from on high. A culture that came from the people would reflect more of the people's values. When you go to a small town in Alabama, and you see a population 2,000 and there's, 15 churches, that wasn't from on high. It wasn't a bunch of elites saying we need to put 15 churches in that town. No, 15 churches popped up in that town, and it happened organically. Prayer meetings happen organically, things like that. A town, deciding to pass laws against saying they're going to veto the COVID mandates, that happens organically. Anything else that you see that's really outside of people's personal beliefs, I believe that culture is constructed from up top. I mean, remember in the 2000s, it was okay for leftists to be anti-war, and it wasn't. Yeah, and it wasn't because they are inherently anti-war. It's because the people up high, their leadership pushed them in that direction, because you had to be against George W. Bush, or you're just pushing against whatever right-wing ideology, or you're just pushing the dialectic. And so I don't see culture. Maybe at one time culture dictated politics. I don't think we're there anymore. I think power is dictating culture. And
I guess you're right on that. I think Hollywood influences society a lot more. So as a general rule, I would agree with you. It's mainly top down, at least in the civilization, maybe since social media really took hold.
Yeah, it's and that's the thing with social media and Twitter. That's why even when I get kicked off at Twitter, I always have another account ready to go, because that's where you're seeing the political culture being pushed. That's where you're seeing where you'll know what's coming next. If you're on Twitter, you'll know what's coming next. So
yeah,
and I mean, this whole thing with Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine gate. Oh God, look at the way Trump treated the Ukrainians. These people need to be. I didn't see that. I didn't put that together until the invasion and February 23rd last year, and seeing exactly how it was being reported on immediately. I was like, oh, okay, that's how they did it. Wow, they're good. Yeah, we need our own. So those are good. That's good social engineering. And until people on the right, or to the right of the spectrum, get their own social engineers and figure out how to do this, I'm just going to keep losing.
And that I'm actually in favor of that. Once I came to the realization to propagandize is like a neutral thing. It's like, well, why aren't we out there pushing our ideas in the schools? Why aren't we trying to influence these institutions that have been co-opted by the far radical left, and even what today is considered to be a moderate left-wing person? Why aren't we doing the same thing? They're out there doing it.
Yeah, I mean, Edward Bernays said in what was his? Can't remember the name of it. It's in 1947.
There was propaganda, or there was a
this was
public opinion.
Yeah, there was crystallizing public opinion.
Yeah.
This was something he wrote in 1947. I actually read it on my podcast. I'm trying to see if this is it right here. It's basically him doing an update on what here it is. Bernays, The Engineering of Consent. It's from it's 8 pages. It's from 1947. It was after he, you have the TVs now. TVs are showing up in people's houses.
Yep.
So what he writes in the first section of that is, he says, these words are wild. Freedom of speech and its democratic corollary, a free press, have tacitly expanded our Bill of Rights to include the right of persuasion. Just replace persuasion with propaganda. This development was an inevitable result of the expansion of the media of free speech and propaganda, deemed in other articles in this volume, penned in other articles in this volume. All these media provide, and this is the key, all these media provide open doors to the public mind. Any one of us through these media may influence the attitudes and actions of our fellow citizens. We need our own propaganda. And if you believe it's a neutral, then I'm okay with that at this point. I think that it can be, I think it can be a detriment. But if you're propagandizing people towards more liberty, whatever that means, that's another problem I have with the whole liberty movement thing. Ask 10,000 people what liberty means, you get 10,000 different answers. What liberty is to them. It's propaganda is very important. We always do it. Propaganda is flirting, trying to get a girl to go on a date with you, trying to get a girl to marry you. I mean, this is all propaganda. And maybe that's why libertarians aren't good at it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That was a cheap shot. And I'm not the and I don't have the greatest history of as somebody who's divorced and had a horrible public relationship, but am now married to a wonderful woman. I'm trying to learn by my mistakes.
You know, it's interesting. It's just libertarians, a lot of libertarians, not all, of course, but as a general rule, libertarians have been fairly idealistic. And I think that's where a lot of mockery can come from. That's
It's a good
it's
thing, it's like
deserved.
idealism is really good. It's important. I mean, we need it. The problem is that when you have a group of people who who know how to manipulate your ideals to the point where they enslave you, that's when you really have to step back and go, I know I'm sticking to this ideology, and I know that as long as somebody, everything's being done by consent, and no one's being forced, that's how you end up with prostitution on the streets, and it's funny. I was saying that, and I was like, I asked some ideological libertarian. I said, if there was a prostitute on the corner of every street in your town, do you think that would be a detriment to your town? And they said no. And I was like, I don't understand how you can say that. If 10% of the women, let's say 5% of the women in a town, and I'm saying this because we're in this hyperinflation. I've studied the Weimar Republic. I know it wasn't only about hyperinflation. There was a whole lot more going on there that destroyed that society. And prostitution was rampant. And I'm talking about child prostitution. I'm talking about mother-daughter teams. I'm talking about really disgusting, degenerate stuff. But if you had, say, and this is a large number, you had a town of 5,000 people, of 2,000 people, and 5% of the women were prostitutes, and only prostitutes online. They weren't on the streets. They weren't. They were doing it in private. That would still affect your culture. It would still affect your culture. People would know. People would talk about it. Where are their Johns coming from? I mean, it would affect your culture, and it would go down fast, and it would be really fast. And look at OnlyFans. I mean, I mean, this is, and now they're talking about AI porn. Where you can, and they're talking. I was, man, I don't want to do anything to get the channel, but they were talking about like child, like using AI porn to, and I'm like,
to quail the
and I'm like, man, I'm like, where that's going to go, right? It's going to go. They're going to go to the most debased things. They're going to take real children's faces and put them on those models. So then the real child sees that and sees them being what, in a snuff film or something like that. I mean, come on. Pump the brakes. I mean, like, really slam on the brakes and think about what's not. And this is an anti-technology kind of thing. Although I am a real big Uncle Ted respecter. I think everyone knows that. But for different, but for different reasons. But I mean, you really have to think about freedom and liberty and all this. It all comes with responsibility, and it all comes with consequences. And if you can't figure out that certain things that don't violate the non-aggression principle are going to have very real consequences on not only individuals, but on society at large, you haven't really thought this through.
Yeah. I actually had a conversation. Well, wasn't much of a conversation. It was just a couple of Twitter comments back and forth between me and one of the county party members here in my county. I had made a post on Twitter saying that we should slut shame, whether it's men or females, like we should. And this is out of libertarian bounds, but in my opinion, and this is actually probably one of my favorite quotes of yours. when you were talking to Kyle Matovik recently, is that degeneracy grows the state.
Mhm.
And I
It's obvious.
wholeheartedly believe that. And that's why I was saying, we've been trying this hookup culture since the 60s, and we're not happier, we're not better off. It's come at a huge detriment to society. And the old adage of, well, it doesn't affect me, so it I don't care, it's somebody else's business. And it's like, but it is your business because it affects your society ultimately.
Yeah, a good woman who is grounded in faith, and it's like, I mean, I have nothing bad to say about my ex-wife. She's a wonderful woman. I've known her over half my life, and just a great person. Always will be my friend. But the relationship I have with my current wife is just really grounding, and I saw a friend. If I mentioned his name, you probably know who he is. Mike Mahary from 10th
No.
Amendment Center. Yeah, and I saw him recently, and he just looked at me and he's like, "You look so different and so much happier than the last time I saw you." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm still as angry." He's like, "Yeah, but you're like happy right now." And really, I would hate to call my wife this, but she's she's sort of a normie. Doesn't want to be a content creator, doesn't want to have a podcast, doesn't want to write, doesn't want to do, wants to grow food and, have a garden and stuff like that. And it's just it's really helped me to understand what's most important. And, all this activism 24/7 is just absolutely detrimental to your health. And
Agreed.
it really hurts. It can cause problems with your health, and just being able to sit back and just relax and just have a normal conversation where we're not, if somebody's bringing up you know the latest thing that the trans agenda is pushing, it's me. And it's like, why am I talking about this? I talk about it enough and everything, and you know right now I'm just trying to educate people. I'm trying to educate people on things that I'm reading. Once I'm in the process, we're in the process of looking for a house and some land. Once I get that, once we start slowly start growing food, you get some chickens down the line, I'll start talking about that. And
Yeah.
but right now I just want to concentrate on talking about what I know, the books I'm reading, the people I'm meeting, and the voices that I would have never considered talking to when I was in libertarian circles and in part of the libertarian identity. And I just want people to think outside the box, because I was in that box for a long time, and that box it starts closing in on you. You have a tendency to start being like, well, this person just mentioned a way that things could improve a little bit by using the state. Oh boy, this your box closes in a little more, because the state's immoral. No, the state's
Yeah.
neutral. It's who's using the state that's immoral. People are immoral. A gun is not immoral or moral. It's who has control over it. So yeah, I mean, I'm just like, find cool things to read and read them on the podcast, find cool people to interview, talk with them on the podcast, write my Substack, and 3 days a week, and try to expose as much as possible. Maybe try to open up people's minds a little more about how I'm seeing the world, and where I think we're at. And just, I mean,
Yeah.
I think at this point right now, unless you're doing like very small things at the local level, I think any kind of political action you're taking is just a waste of time, and more importantly, a waste of people's money.
Yeah. I would agree. I'm actually chairman of my county libertarian party. And I believe that that's the only true level that a libertarian party could exist. I believe that that's where any of the action needs to be taking place, is at the local level, the county commissions, the, I can't believe I'm just blanking on this.
School board.
Yeah, school board, the city administrators.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I believe that that's the only true level a libertarian party could exist. Because it seems like, and you get up bigger than that even at the state level, and they're just it's problems. And then you go bigger than that and it's just problems. You go bigger than that and it's just problems. And well, I know my county people better than anyone else.
Yeah, one of the problems that I had when I was promoting the Libertarian Party at one point, and then I started reading more about bureaucracy and how bureaucracy always basically how it devolves, especially how organizations fall victim to basically the most ideological in the organization don't get control. It's always the people who are the most bureaucratically minded, because it's a bureaucracy. So obviously the most bureaucratically minded. And that's when I looked at the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. I mean, and I was just like, well, I mean, this isn't for me. And then I looked at, ideology. It's like, that's when I realized, well, real republicanism has never been tried. Real democracy has never been tried. Real libertarianism has never been tried. Real anything, just put anything in there. It's never been tried. You can use that for religion too. It's never been tried. Oh, yeah. Why has it never been tried? Because, well, I mean, it's people, man. Corruptible people. If you're religious, sinful people, fallen people, it's just not. It's not going to materialize in reality. So,
yeah,
I mean, the whole party structure. The only reason I don't like the term libertarian when it comes to politics, is even at the local level, is because a lot of people just have the term comes with baggage. And I'm really not in I've spent enough of my life, I've spent enough of the last 10 years trying to change people's minds about certain things. And it's to just go out there to normies who already have an idea of what something means, and what a term means, and to use it. And it's like anarchist. It's like people who want to call themselves anarchists. That's just, that term's been destroyed. You're not going to.
I don't even bother.
You're not going to get that back. You can use something like voluntarist or something like that, because at least people, they're not going to have any idea. You can have a conversation with them and push them towards that direction. But yeah, for the most part, I see ideology more and more every day as just a detriment, a weakness that somebody else is going to use to manipulate you. And you see that on the right. It's like I did the very rare tweet thread, and for me a thread is like 3 tweets in a row before we started this, and I basically said that the right wing is all about infighting, and the left wing, the reason all right wing movements descend into infighting and eventually just splinter. And it doesn't happen with the left, because the left polarizes. Now we'll get into some Saul Alinsky language. Polarizes their enemy, and they see them. They have a common enemy, and they look at them as a real enemy. People on the right and even libertarians do not see the enemy for what it is. And
I agree.
And the left has to, and Uncle Ted wrote about this. They have to have an external enemy, because fighting and destroying people is who they are in their nature. If they didn't have an enemy, they would have to invent an enemy. And if they didn't have an enemy to invent, then they would start killing each other, because that is just the contentious nature of what they are. And when you realize that if you won't bend the knee, they don't care if you're dead or alive. Look at the way they reacted when which one was which Koch brother died a few years ago? It wasn't Charles. It wasn't Charles. It was the other one.
Yeah.
And the other one was like
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, Charles is the scumbag. I mean, he's the one who opened borders and pushing to bring immigrants in to take American jobs. The other one was like this philanthropist who had like museum wings in New York City named after him and everything. When he died, I mean, it was celebrated. I mean, the people on the right and even libertarians only celebrate like the death of the worst people, like Che or Castro, or
John
they're not.
McCain.
Yeah, they're not. When Nancy Pelosi dies, I mean, it's like, I mean, there are going to be some people out there, but it's not going to be this gigantic. You'll have people on the right going, no, be respectful, and everything. It's like, well, maybe that is the decent thing to do, but you definitely do not look at, if you're championing, if you're, I'll mention this. When it was very easy to see who on the right wasn't your friend, when Dave Rubin and his husband announced that they were buying 2 kids, and all you had to do is look at the people on the right who congratulated him. Those aren't your friends. They're not your allies. Those are not people that are going to stand there and fight for you when the mob comes for you. They're not going. They may post a tweet about how terrible it is, but they're not going to donate money to get you bailed out of jail if you get thrown into jail for something like the left did throughout 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, the left is, even when they infight, but they only cast out people that they absolutely feel like they must cast out. But the ones that they cast out what do? They immediately go and they're like latch on to the right. And then the right has all these left-leaning people who just agree with them on one thing. And then you have the James Lindsays of the world, who is very anti-woke, but also says he's way more scared of the right than he is of the left. The right rising up in the left. I mean, when I started reading Carl Schmitt, and he talks about the friend-enemy distinction, and that really applies to politics and leaders, and rewarding your friends and punishing your enemies. But I think you can learn something from it. You can bring it down to a smaller level. That's what I do. I'm like, all right, how, I mean, who's an egalitarian? Who's talking about egalitarian things? That person's not on the right. Who's talking about who's congratulating Dave Rubin for basically human trafficking? I mean, sorry, like these.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, the left casts out their people. When they cast out their people, most of those people end up on the right, and they end up just weakening the right. You wonder if it's done on purpose, if this is just done to infiltrate or something like that. There was this thing of leftists getting canceled a few years ago, but you don't hear much about it anymore. Every once in a while, you'll see like a scalp being taken or something like that. But I think they realize we need to stick together, because the right is just, the right like reaches out to the left. The left reaches out to the left and cancels to the right. The right reaches out to the left and cancels to the right. They do the same exact thing that the left does. Yeah. So it's like, who is the right? Who is the right? And I can't.
Question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a quote that I heard earlier today, and I thought it was fairly pertinent to kind of the conversation I thought we were going to have, which seems to be going fairly similar to what I thought, but I wasn't quite, I didn't know
Cool.
quite what to think. But
Cool.
the quote is from Marcus Aurelius, and it's waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. And I think that that's one thing that libertarians or people just in the liberty movement tend to not do. Of course, I'm generalizing, of course, but we should lead by example, in my opinion.
Well, one of the, you know, economics is one of the main concentrations of libertarianism. At least, good libertarians, libertarians that I can still have a conversation with. I mean, I think Jeff Deist once said that if you meet a libertarian who doesn't really understand economics, they're usually really a bad libertarian.
So you're saying the sex worker libertarians are
don't even get me started. But I think Tom Woods has it right. He's like, look, if you want to be taken seriously, you have to be impressive people. I think that's what he's doing with the school of life that he started. I went to an event. I'm a member. I went to an event, and it's all these people talking about their W's, talking about how they're using this as a way to build the life that they want for themselves and to be entrepreneurs. And I remember, what the hell is her name from antiwar.com, Angela Keaton.
Mm-hmm.
I remember her one time. Somebody had said on Twitter about how libertarians and anarcho-capitalists are just a bunch of people who were born on third base and think they hit a home run. And Angela goes, every libertarian and anarcho-capitalist I know has 2 or 3 jobs. And I was like, are you trying to own them with this statement? That's not a good statement. That's not good at all. That means that, well, I mean, what if it took me almost 4 years of putting out 3 episodes a week, writing articles and doing all sorts of things, and working on a full-time job, 45 to 50 hours a week, to work myself into the point where I don't have to do this anymore, where I don't have a boss. The listeners, the readers are my boss. They let me know if I'm doing a good job by unsubscribing and not sending me donations every month, and or subscribing. But I mean, if I can if I can work myself out of a job, because I basically worked 2 full-time jobs for 4 years. And now it gets to the point where, I mean, I don't have to have an alarm clock if I don't want to, and most mornings I don't. I do set an alarm, but I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll be like, yeah, I'm just going to shut this off because I don't care. But I mean, but that's not it too. It's the fact that I can move anywhere. I can work from anywhere as long as I have internet. As long as I have good internet. I mean, I basically control what I'm doing. And for libertarians to talk about Austrian economics and entrepreneurship and not embrace it, it's like I said earlier, it's like my goal is by the end of the year is to have land, start growing, start having a food garden and try to expand it beyond just a garden, and then start getting some chickens and stuff. I'm not going to talk about that and promote that until I'm doing it. So I'm not going to fake it until I make it. And right now I try not to talk on the podcast about anything that I don't know about, that I don't that I haven't read about. If there's a subject that I don't know about that I want on my podcast, I'll invite someone on who knows that subject and let them talk about it, and I'll learn. People ask me, why did you do 23 episodes on World War II with Thomas 777? Because one, I think World War II is, the way it's reported, is insidious, the good war, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And two, because I wanted to know. I wanted to learn all that, because some of that I knew, most of it I didn't. So for me to try to sit there and read out of a book or do something, no, I have someone who's been studying it for years, and only needs, if he's using any notes at all, it's just an outline, so you got to do, if you can't, it's hard to go out there and promote something if you're not living it. I mean, to promote liberty when, you will literally, people, they will literally say taxation is theft, taxation is slavery. Well, and because of taxation, I could have a better life if it wasn't for taxation, and then Matt Erickson gets shit on my podcast for saying, well, just earn more money. Jason Stapleton gets shit for saying, just earn more money. Well, yeah, that's it. Oh, well, I don't want to pay more taxes towards the war in Yemen. If you aren't paying the taxes towards the war in Yemen, they just print it anyway. So you're just going to shoot. You're going to shoot. Yeah, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, or maybe you just don't want to try and you just like talking. Well, there was a time when all I did was talk about libertarianism. Now I'm sort of living it a little bit in that, I have liberty in my life that I didn't have before. I don't have a boss. I don't have a time I need to be somewhere. I don't have to make excuses if I'm sick, and call the boss and try to sound sicker than I am just so that, I don't get in trouble because I'm ill and I can't work. That's a little bit more liberty than the average person. And, once you get that, you're like, maybe I want a little more. And what is a little more? And that's where that whole question of what does liberty mean to you come in. Yeah. And that's when the individual, that's when you have to think about being an individual. Okay. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your family. If you can't take care of your family, you can't be a help to your community. But you can't get to that. You can't live just as an individual. You can, and you may be able to live the rest of your life without the state coming down upon you, or, with the state's edicts really affecting you. Most people aren't like that. They're going to have to get together with other like-minded people. And that's when you have to balance being an individual and being part of a collective. Because if you're not part of a collective, you're really out there, just waiting to be taken down. Another thing Ryan McMakin said in our documentary was that, of course, you'd want to live in a community of sorts, because in a stateless, if you had a stateless society, just being out there on your own, you're just waiting for a bigger, stronger group to come along and take what you got. Everybody thinks if they have, if they have a saw, if they have an M249, they'll be able to hold off the hordes forever. Well, you're gonna run out of ammo at some point. So you need friends.
You can only reload so much.
Yeah, even belt fed goes really fast. Anyone who's shot a belt fed weapon, it goes really fast.
Yeah, right. So one thing I wanted to ask you was, and we'll start wrapping up here, so I don't keep you too long. If you had, as of now, where things sit with you in your life, if you had a message to not just libertarians, but the liberty movement in general, what would it be?
It's what I just said. Take care of yourself first. Take care of yourself first. I don't want to call anybody out, but I heard about somebody in the Mises caucus who was working for them. I won't say where, 20 to 30 hours a week. But when the end of the month came, they were asking people for rent money. You're talking about being a part of a party that can do is going to have a minimal impact, and you're basically, you can't make your bills because you're putting all this effort into it. Take care of yourself first. I'm not saying you can't be politically active without without being successful as an individual. But if you're going to do it locally. Don't be paying for plane tickets and hotel rooms and flying, all the way across the country when you can't afford it. When when you're struggling, when you have to do a GoFundMe in order to pay your bills the next month. And I'm not going to name who it was, but it was someone in the Mises Caucus did that with the 2022 um, um, convention, and I didn't want to call him out on it. And he got into my DMs and he's like, "No, man, I deserve it." He said, "I deserve it. I screwed up. I should have never allowed myself to get in that situation and everything." Take care of yourself, build up your own wealth. Then family comes next. Make sure you have a close knit family. Um, I tell people to homeschool, but I also tell them all homeschooling is going to do is going to make sure that your kid grows up really, grows up well adjusted, but you're probably going to tell them that political power is immoral and that politics is wrong. But the other 97 to 98% of kids in the society are not getting that. They're getting a progressive education and they're going to enslave your kid. So homeschool your kids. If you own property, you're already paying for public schools through property taxes. So go get elected to the school board and get all that. Make sure turn the local school board. And I know this isn't easy. Turn the local school board into yours and institute a classical education. It's, change the curriculum completely, and do that because you want the people around you to share your values and to not be complete lunatics. And that lends itself to you take care of your family, and then you take care of you seek to fortify the surrounding area of where you are, and then hopefully bunch of communities pop up like that and you can network. Hopefully some of them are close to each other and you can form these big clusters. And if you just have the sheriff on your side, a sheriff, most people don't realize these federal agencies cannot operate without the help of local law enforcement or local agencies. If your local agencies will not help and we'll tell them, "No, you're not welcome here. Just turn around. You cannot come in here." You can save. I mean, I've been looking for small towns here in Alabama, and the first town we visited and looked at, population about 2,000 to 4,000. I can't remember exactly where. But we went to a restaurant. We asked about the mayor, and they had some complaints about the mayor and everything. I think it was like just blood libel from generations of living there, probably the two families. But I said, "Well, how did he handle COVID?" He said, "Well, he didn't. He just let us do what we wanted." Because even in Alabama, I mean, Meemaw here, Governor Meemaw, she instituted a mask mandate at some point. She's a Republican. She won with more than 2 times the vote. The vote more than 2 to 1 this last election. And she had a mask mandate. And this little town up in Alabama that I've been to a few times now, they were just like, "Nah, we're not doing it. We're not going to do it." That's something. That really says something. If an elected politician, no matter what level they're at, is willing to tell somebody with real power who controls the National Guard, "Screw you," that's a lot better than anti-war demonstrations in Washington, D.C. It's going to affect your life and the lives of people around you more than a demonstration, which won't change anything.
Wow, well said. To kind of go back to what we were talking about just right at the very beginning, is that, well, to repeat what I said, is to lead by example. These things are actually really important, and when people ask you, then maybe you can drop your ideology, but people are going to be impressed when you live these ideas and see how wonderful your life is if you can make it work for yourself. And then it's going to be important when they say, hey, why is that? And it's like, oh, well, I believe this.
It's like Mike Myrie said to me, he said, you just seem so much more happy. Well, yeah, I worked on myself. I improved my own personal situation. And because I improved my own personal situation, I feel a lot more confident to go out there and to talk about the things that I talk about and do the things that I plan on doing. And that is important. I mean, people don't realize just anyone who hasn't had success, and I mean, I've had success in the business world. It's just you're strangled. You're always answering to somebody. Even if you're CEO, you're answering to the stockholders. The just success. I mean, and especially success where you're like all these anarchists who are like, no gods, no masters, these retards. They you have bosses. I mean, the friolator is not going to operate itself. So try doing it. Try some success in your life and see what happens. When you change personally, it gives you more confidence to be able to go out there and see if you can elicit some change in the world. Yeah, it's success. I think. I mean, it sounds like a friggin', like a Tony Robbins something, but success does promote and breed success, and you want more of it. Yeah.
And courage is courageous, or contagious.
Courage is contagious, man. Let me tell you something. You see someone out there doing something. What was Ron Paul? Ron Paul standing on that debate stage in 2007 when everyone in that room is against him. And I'm just like, I could do that.
Man, so me.
I could do that.
So, just to wrap up on the last question, this is something I ask everybody because I like getting the different answers. Just like you said, you get 10 different answers for this question when you ask 10,000 different people. Just to kind of summarize, what does liberty mean to you?
Liberty to me just means to be able to live my life in a way that trying to put it into words and not make it sound so much like it would come out to sound like to be on my land, to at least have control over some of my own food production, to be happy with the person I'm with, and then when I leave that land, to go out into a world where order is primary, where people do not need to be told to not aggress against somebody else, to not steal, to not murder, and to not promote things that would take away that order. That they would just instinctively know that violence, theft, things like that, even quote unquote degeneracy is going to lead to disorder, and it's going to lead to chaos. And to be able to have that order on your land and on your home and in your home, and I've not always had that, and I'm at fault for that. But to be able to leave your land too and experience that would be liberty.
Well, that's well said. And on that note, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Pete, for coming on. This was an absolutely phenomenal conversation, and we'll definitely get you back on, especially as things develop in the world and things get more crazy, I'm sure. So
thank you, Jacob. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Do you want to shout anything out where people can find you?
Pete Quinones show just dropped an episode with Tommy Salmons from the Libertarian Institute. He's the OG of OGs on ESG and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he was first time he ever talked about it was that I ever talked to him about it was on my show in March of 2020. So I mean, this guy's been talking about it long before a lot of people have been talking about it. So the Pete Quinones show, my Substack does. Let me shout out Substack. I mean, this is. I mean, you're waiting for you're waiting for it to fall because you know it's like everything's going to go woke at some point and everything. But Substack has been great to me. I have the only thing I would ever now I did buy a blue check mark on my old account. I'm going to buy one on my new account, but the only reason I'm buying the check mark is so you can load videos on there that are an hour long.
Yep.
I like having my content on as much things as possible, and I will pay $8 a month just to be able to put my full episodes on Twitter. But Substack, PeteSubstack.com, they gave me a check mark. They're the only ones that would ever give me a check mark when you reach a certain amount of subscribers, when you get what they call hundreds of subscribers. And I saw a friend of mine who has thousands of subscribers, paid subscribers now. And Substack, I mean, I put some, I put some inflammatory shit on there, and I've never caught anything on there, any flack. No one's ever from Substack's ever reached out to me, other than to be like, hey, you know, we're giving you this check mark and congratulations. And then you can look at my documentary on Amazon Prime, The Monopoly on Violence. We have another documentary that just came out about a month ago. It's on Vimeo. If you search Over Policed, you can check that out. It's our history of policing and exactly what policing has turned into in the United States and why, the economics of policing, a lot of that. And the Old Glory Club, a bunch of us came together, formed a fraternity, literally formed a fraternity, 501c8, I think it is. And it's just a bunch of content creators supporting each other and, you know, coming together to platform each other and talk about ways that
awesome.
we can get back to American, you know, traditional American values. All we got to do, we don't even have to go back very far. You know, I know that I think these classical liberals want to go back to the 1990s, and that's where it all I mean, it all started long before then, but you know, we don't have to go back to pushing plows, but the kind of morality and the kind of thought about how what the world is, when you go back 100, 150 years, it was a lot different. And there was a lot more order. A lot of people, you could keep your doors open, and people knew their neighbors' names, and people expected things to be orderly. So we talk a lot about Americana and American history there. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Oh man, I love that. I'm gonna have to check that out. Yeah. So
it's got a YouTube channel and a Substack. Yeah.
Oh, killer. Yeah, I'm going to have to make sure and check that out. And for anyone else who's made it to this point in the episode, risetoliberty.com/links, where you can also find my Substack, Liberty Letter. And got a couple of articles. I don't post quite as much as I should. I should put more energy into it, especially after hearing how well they've treated Pete here. So on that note, make sure to check us out. We do have some upcoming shows, usually once, twice a week, always. So if not more. So on that note, hang out for a second, Pete, so we can make sure the recordings get uploaded. And everyone else, until next time, stay free, my friends.